Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. When you're playing at the game table, it's important to remember that everyone is there to have fun. Every person has a preference on how often they want to be in the spotlight, and for some people, just one cool moment here and there is enough for them. But occasionally, you'll have an individual that will hog all the spotlight and then complain to everyone at the table that they simply aren't getting the character progression that they deserve. So how do you gauge if someone is just an enthusiastic role player versus someone that's a problem player? I think it really boils down to if you're willing to take a step back when a plot point clearly seems to be made for another character. A good group will find a way to get everyone involved at some level, but if you always seem to find a way to make each story hook solely about you, then you have lost the plot, pun intended. Today's treasure is actually two stories submitted to lootgoblinstories@gmail.com. I picked these two stories because they're kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. You have one person who's definitely a problem player because they always fight for themselves, and then you have one player who doesn't fight for themselves nearly enough in their story. So let's start off with the first one called Problem Player Leaves Game Mid-Combat, Gets Mad When We Continue Without Her. For this story, I'll be referring to people based on classes. The following cast of characters are the Dungeon Master, our first time full campaign DM who still DMs for us to this day, and left us with some very fond memories. The Artificer, the party comedy relief and great inventor who tested the limits of the game and forging items. That turned the party members into walking gods later on. The Rogue, with a typical edgy backstory of the abandoned at birth assassin. However, he had a very sweet character arc that allowed him to open up to the party and become more vulnerable with them. Me, who at first I played a dull fighter who lost his memory and was slowly retracing his steps before his tragic death, to then playing a cocky but cowardly thief who turned into the party's lovable jackass, thankfully. And then Salt, the problem player who went through I think 3 characters over the course of the story, all with the same theme of being sadistic, evil, and working against the party and ultimately the Dungeon Master. As for the setting, it was your standard medieval fantasy theme with a classic Skyrim entrance. That later introduced us to our first shifty guide, NPC. Our session 0 and first couple of sessions all seemed to be relatively fine, with the party exploring the world and putting together our first mystery of a crazy old man with cryptic messages. With some super sleuthing to the point the DM said we didn't even need to roll, we discovered a group of werewolves near the village whom we were expecting to fight, but we were informed that they were being mind controlled by the big bad evil guy's hidden cultists. We asked the werewolves if they knew what the big bad evil guy looked like after a very high persuasion check from the rogue. I think a 25 to 26 modified off a natural 20, and lo and behold, the big bad evil guy was the shifty NPC. Unfortunately, I had to leave the call. We play online over Discord. When we discovered that we were going to speak with the big bad evil guy, I told the others they could continue without me and fill me in later. Of course, this is when Salt's first problem happened and nearly caused a total party kill. I found out later that instead of our plan to be subtle, Salt directly confronted the big bad evil guy and forced his hand to decide to kill us all. From what I was told, so this is purely hearsay, Salt jumped into Artificer's bag of holding and let Rogue and Artificer deal with the big bad evil guy and his henchmen as 2 level 2 characters. When asked why Salt did that, it was then followed by, "It's what my character would do." This understandably annoyed us, but this was everyone's first campaign, and we never knew about the horror stories of the character excuse, so we just rolled with it. Long story short, the party's almost burned alive, and the village is nothing more than burnt structures. Ashen corpses with the scent of burnt flesh in the air, and the ground scorched so hotly by magic fire, it turned the initial impact into a volcanic obsidian glass. The DM really loved immersing us, and it was very fun. This caused my fighter to have a flashback and a memory awaken about the henchman being a vampire. And so our journey began to buy as much holy water as possible from the next town over, as we managed to find the trail of the big bad evil guy and the vampire. And it's here that another Salt problem happens. 2 sessions later, we find the vampire and his men, and find the best moment to attack is either at dusk or at dawn. We thought maybe dawn, since we had a lot of healing items and a decent AC, to maybe try and outlast the vampire and let the morning sun finish him off. Salt refused to do this plan, stating her character wouldn't wake up at dawn and was a heavy sleeper. Artificer said he could just shake Salt awake, but she wasn't having it. She said that it was already dusk, and so we should take advantage of it now. Rogue attempted to talk her down and said that we could have a long rest earlier, which was verified with our DM, but Salt threw a fit and stated her character runs into the vampire's camp. We were all silent at this, with the DM asking if Salt was certain about this, and with my fighter stating that he would attempt to grapple her to stop her. Artificer said he would try try to do the same, with Rogue stating he'd grant the help action. The result? Me, I roll a 22 and a 16. Artificer, an 18 and a natural 1. Salt, natural 20. I hunt for the vampire and stab him in the face. DM, well, you run in there and see you and the party are outnumbered 2 to 1. Make a perception check too. Salt, but I rolled a nat 20. I get to do what I want, so I stab him in the face. I think I facepalmed in real life when this exchange happened, since my experience with D&D was pretty limited, but even I knew that a nat 20 doesn't allow you to become immune to all consequences. The DM tried to tell Salt this as well, but she refused and forced us into combat against what we later learned was this vampire lord DM had for us to fight at a much higher level. We rolled initiative and Salt gets annoyed that she rolls last, and demands she gets advantage on surprising the enemy. The dungeon master explained to her that not only didn't she sneak, but she doesn't automatically damage the vampire. She eventually relents and the battle continues for about 3 turns, with the vampire's henchmen being taken out one by one. However, on the next turn there's radio silence from her before we get a random series of about 10 numbers in the text chat, and then these are my rolls for the fight, see ya. And just like that, Salt leaves the call mid-battle and goes offline. We were all gobsmacked at this since it was legit mid-battle, and we didn't know what to do other than continue the fight with the rolls we were given until we reached the end. Our DM decided that Salt's character suddenly fainted as a result of it. Since we thought it would be awkward to end mid-boss fight, somehow we just barely managed to defeat the vampire with a mixture of grappling him, expending all our holy water, and the dual-wielding fighting style of my fighter. Our DM was amazed we did it and rewarded us 2 level ups, which we were very thankful of. Everyone except for Salt. She was pissed we continued when her rolls were gone, and we told her we couldn't do anything else without just dropping the combat then and there. Artificer eventually snapped at Salt and she left the call, with Rogue saying he was trying to smooth things out in the private messages, and the DM was doing damage control with Artificer as he was considering leaving the campaign. We didn't leave and brushed it off as a one-off incident, telling Salt that D&D wasn't a solo game, it's a team game. She seemed fine with it and we thought it was all over. Nope, it happened again and in another boss fight. Now, to emphasize something important about Salt, if her character wasn't the center of attention, she would be disengaged from what was happening, and even then she was kinda only interested and invested whenever something of essentially soft ERP came up. This happened several times, in addition to half forcing sexual content into the game, with some very questionable things that are for another story entirely if you want a full epic on Salt. If you're willing to write it out, I'm definitely down to listen to it. I always love me some more cringe. But let's finish up this story. With Salt not being interested in anything outside of being the main character, none of us really cared or had issues the second time she did the roll numbers thing and then dipped the call. Although this time was a lot more insulting since she said, "Let me know when combat is over," and then left the call. She then was annoyed at us when we told her what happened. We reminded her that she didn't seem to care in her message she wrote to us, but no, we were in the wrong for listening to her request. Strangely though, it wasn't this that made her rage quit our campaign, as she had a major crash out with the entire party on how skill checks were supposed to work, since that's not how it works in Baldur's Gate, and the party wasn't letting her do what she wanted. In addition to the fact that the fantasy currency doesn't translate over to in real life currency, which was another rage quit from Salt that almost destroyed the campaign entirely. I'm a little confused what that means. I really want to hear about this crash out specifically. Needless to say, we're all very glad we no longer have her at our table. That was really a quick and powerful story. If I had a D&D bingo card right now for horror stories, I would have checked a lot of boxes here. I really do love Baldur's Gate 3, don't get me wrong, but it's slowly becoming the new Critical Role complaint where people say like, that's not what Matt Mercer would do. Whenever the DM chooses to do something that's different than how it's done in Baldur's Gate 3, it is based off 5th edition, but every table's a little differently, and the way the game engine works is slightly different than how the rules work at the table. You have the option to homebrew everything so it's identical to how Baldur's Gate 3 plays, but don't assume that your dungeon master is going to do it that way just because you like the game. There is a pretty good chance they cheated here though if they just typed the numbers into Discord. If they were using like a virtual tabletop and you could see them do like all 20 dice rolls ahead of time and it's just like in the chat and then you scroll up to look at it after the fact, that would be one way to handle that if for some reason you had to leave but you didn't want to be down a player. But obviously the reason they're leaving is because they can't be bothered to stick around for combat, but then they get the fear of missing out when something cool happens that wasn't just roll a hit, deal damage. So clearly this Dungeon Master does a lot of cool things narratively, and that translates into the combat. This is 100% an issue that the player created and then is mad when it's not resolved. I've actually had a situation where I pre-rolled a bunch of moves for random NPCs that were like off screen in a battle. So like the party knows they're fighting in the distance, but no one's realistically interacting with that encounter. I would never consider doing that for a player though. This person is definitely on the extreme end of I'm the main character, everything has to be about me, to the point that she's trying to speedrun combat because she doesn't like it, and then the moment anyone gets a story beat that she wasn't involved in, even if it's her fault that she's not there, it's somehow the entire party and the Dungeon Master's problem. So yeah, overall sounds super frustrating. I'd love to read a little bit more about those other crash outs. Now that we've seen one extreme, let's jump over to the other one. The second story for today goes by the name The Assassination of My Favorite Character. But before I go any further, I wanted to give D&D Dice a shout out, my favorite dice shop and where half of my paycheck goes to every month. They've got a lot of options, including their original 11-piece dice sets that they call the King of Crits series. Be sure to use the code LootGoblin to support the channel at dnddice.com, or you can just click the link down in that video description and it'll be added when you check out with your favorite dice. As an edgelord myself, my favorite collections are the Plague Doctor and Blood Hunter 11-piece sets, which I use alongside their Tomb of the Lich dice tower. Anyways, back to the video. For about a year now, I've been part of an ongoing one-shot West Marches campaign, which is kind of based around Delicious in Dungeon, which is a fantastic anime. The story of this still ongoing campaign is divided into 3 arcs. Arc 1 finished up not too long ago. We are currently in Arc 2. The DM stated that they would like this arc to be more player versus player focused to drive the narrative. My story takes place at the beginning of Arc 2. I created a character in this world who was a phantom rogue, and my whole shtick was that he had crazy, insane mobility. I really loved this character and enjoyed playing him in this world. Some time passed at the beginning and everything was going well. I would have fun, join tables, and play some really fun Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of interesting people. Due to some real life events, I had to temporarily leave on more than one occasion to deal with my own real life problems. But I always came back because I truly did enjoy playing with everyone. During the last time I returned, I found out that a longtime NPC had been murdered. My character, who was employed by the murdered NPC, decided to do some investigating. Eventually, I found out that the NPC's death was tied to a group of people who were serving a forgotten death god. During my character's in-game adventures, I discovered players who were also tied to serving that forgotten death god. Upon finding out this information, I decided to investigate and tailgate the different player characters who were associated with the death god to gather evidence and link them to the murder of the NPC. As a result of my character's investigation, he found out that the so-called death god could easily spy on him and inform the other players that my character was onto them. So I concocted a plan with the DM and asked them if I could potentially find a way to disconnect my characters from the gods so they wouldn't be able to spy on him. The DM said I could do this, but it would be considered a very bad thing to do. They said I would need the blood of a divine touch creature. Eventually, we found one that was associated with the death god, which was getting people to murder NPCs. So I decided to go after that creature and get its blood. This divine creature had a specific ability, an aura around it that made it so that players couldn't run away from it, which is literally my character's whole gimmick. As a result, the Dungeon Master described my actions as having great consequences, saying that now that the area no longer has an aspect of death to let the spirits pass through, they basically described to the other players at the table that what I did was a very bad thing that will have major consequences for the region. Sorry for the background information, but it's much needed to set up the next following event. A couple of weeks passed from that initial session, and myself and 3 other players jumped into an upcoming session. I had no idea what that session would entail, as I thought it was just supposed to be a normal session where we go on a hunt to track down a creature and bring it back to the guild. The 3 other players I'll just call by their classes: Ranger, Paladin, and Warlock. The session started with the Paladin approaching my character, confronting me about the ongoing investigation into the murder of the NPC, and saying that he had information about who murdered him. FYI, the Paladin was one of the player characters that was serving the forgotten death god. Intrigued by this, I went along with with his plan, and he told me to meet him at one of the floor gates, where he would bring backup just in case. So the paladin went off to find the ranger, and we all set sail across the ocean to get to an island where the warlock was waiting for us. During the boat ride, I had a heart-to-heart with the ranger and told them, through my character's perspective, why I did what I did during the mission where I tracked down the divine creature. At this point in time, I had only just recently disconnected myself from the gods, right at the beginning of the session. As we stepped onto the island, the paladin took the lead while the warlock was floating in the air, looking down at us. The paladin then turned around and started talking to my character, saying that he was the one that murdered the NPC because the NPC was a bad man, and the death god told him to. The paladin then said his death god had now instructed him to kill me. Before I could react, the paladin cast Hold Person on me with a spell save of 28. To my surprise, I rolled a nat 20, but only to have the warlock player tell me that natural 20s don't succeed on spell saves, basically making it impossible for my character to even achieve the save. For additional context, the warlock player is the big bad evil guy of Arc 2 of this campaign, and has paid the most money in sessions to the Dungeon Master. Currently, he has 225 sessions. In addition, this player and I have had multiple negative interactions with each other as he would metagame a lot and use information from solo sessions that he would listen into to plan around other players. All in all, I've had multiple people tell me that they've had problems with him and his attitude, but since he's the most valued customer to the Dungeon Master, he typically gets away with everything. Luckily, Ranger came in clutch inside with me, pulling out a scroll of anti-magic field and just walking in to dispel the Hold Person on me, but not before the paladin got a couple swings on me. At this point, initiative was rolled and it was a 2v2 between myself and the Ranger versus the paladin and the warlock. I was using my crazy mobility and phantom abilities to sink into the ground and run across the map, taking pot shots at the paladin and the warlock, while Ranger was safe behind his anti-magic field. Eventually, the paladin asked for his death god to give him power, which the Dungeon Master granted, giving him a very powerful sword and a shield with a crazy unique ability, an aura of 10 feet around him, making players have to roll a DC 18 wisdom saving throw. On a failed throw, you cannot leave the area surrounding the paladin, and you take necrotic damage. This was the same ability that the divine creature had. Eventually, after a tough fight, it led my character and the Ranger to a situation where we were trapped in the aura, and the warlock just kept on firing eldritch blasts at us from above. Unfortunately, this eventually killed the Ranger, which wasn't intended, but by some miracle, I was able to roll a 19 on my wisdom saving throw. Needless to say, the session did not end up going the way the Dungeon Master wanted, and they ended up retconning the whole session. In 1 week's time, we actually replayed the session because they wanted it to be more about getting dialogue and story progression, rather than just a big PvP fight. Based on what I'm reading here, this is a West March with a ton of different people, but maybe only one Dungeon Master, and the Warlock is basically a power payer on the server. This guy's paid so much money into the server that he's now essentially bought main character status. The author here just says it's for the second arc, but let's be honest, if this guy keeps paying, he's still going to be the main character in Arc 3. The DM gave the author here an NPC. That NPC was murdered, he investigated it, he goes down this path where he's like, I want to figure out how to stop this death god. I mean, he's a death god, part of a cult, he keeps trying to kill people, seems like a pretty rough guy, and this paladin says, no actually, I work for him, he's a great guy, you're bad, I'm gonna kill you, because it's what my death god said, which isn't really a compelling argument if he was trying to win him over. I can see why the Rangers side with the author here. So now we have an awkward situation where the DM said, you know what, all progressions based off PvP, and my favorite two players are going against two randoms, this rogue and ranger, they don't pay nearly enough in the server, I'm just gonna let them get murdered. Okay, so now I understand all that. Now I'm asking myself, what was he expecting to happen in this session? Did he really want to have the rogue character just show up, get hold person, and then instantly killed by the paladin and warlock combo? If you're a player that's paying for your experience, how would that be fun at all? If the narrative of your campaign is money corrupts, and if you have the most money you can kill the most amount of people, come on man, that's a depressing narrative. I'm trying to escape the real world here. Let me have a little bit of fun and whimsy. If I was the author, I'd quit the session then and there, because I know instantly every time the warlock doesn't get what he wants, the story's gonna bend to his will anyways, so why am I I paying money to be here, but for the sake of finishing the story, let's read what happens next in the retcon. Everyone agreed to this notion, including me, so when the time came to play the session again, we all had a better understanding of what was supposed to happen. During this session, the ranger did not side with me again. Yeah, because he knows he's gonna lose. Even after telling him basically the same situation. We got to the island again, the same situation pretty much happened where the paladin told me that he killed the NPC, and the moment I even tried to say something, the warlock casted hold person, leaving me kinda speechless. I just said to myself, okay, if that's how this is gonna go, then I'm better off killing my character my way than letting him get beaten up and be a punching bag. Eventually the session ended, and ever since then, it has left a very painful and hurtful feeling within me. The ranger and I talked, and he basically told me that this session was supposed to just kill my character, and they had implemented plans to basically make sure that I wouldn't be able to leave the island. Confronting the DM about this, they pretty much said that they didn't know about the whole situation, and said it was pretty much too late to retcon the session, as they didn't want to retcon it a second time. Yeah, very convenient. A couple months passed since that incident, and I was playing my new character and interacting with the story, but anytime I asked the DM if I could potentially start bringing my old character and finding a way to come back into the story and interact with people, they kept on dodging the question and ghosting me, never really giving me a straight answer about my question. The final thing that broke me was when I asked them a few days ago before writing this up. They completely ghosted me until a session that I was supposed to play in, which I skipped because I wasn't in the right headspace. Again, they answered the question without answering the question, saying that there will be updates to the server that might answer this question. Needless to say, the updates they posted didn't answer my question at all. Pretty much after that, I decided to leave the server because I was sick and tired of getting the runaround instead of getting straight answers. The situation has left a very sad feeling in my heart for D&D, but I knew continuing to play on that server would just make me feel even worse than I do now. The players I've interacted with, for the most part, were always kind to me, and I feel bad for leaving, but I've got to do what's best for me. Very sad situation, but honestly a great takeaway at the end there. It does seem like you tried advocating for yourself at the end there, very often out of game. Honestly, in game, it doesn't seem like you could have done anything. This is a story where the warlock is such a main character that you're just a random mob that they kill for XP. It's actually so blatantly clear here that you are nothing more than a mob to the warlock, because the one time you did outsmart him, the entire session got retconned, they made you play a new one, promised a different scenario, actually killed you in the way that they meant to kill you, and then they said to your face, sorry, it doesn't really make sense to retcon it because we basically got exactly what we wanted this time. These people really didn't value your time. It seems like they only value the warlock's time because the warlock's time is money. I actually don't mind the idea of a paid DM. Sometimes you want someone who's a professional that will just show up, do the service. Adventuring leagues exist for the same reason, but when people start paying different amounts and getting different levels of priority, that's when I kind of hate the idea of a paid DM. Obviously in these RPG horror stories, we're only going to ever hear the worst offenders of that. You're never going to hear about the guy who charges a reasonable rate per person, shows up, runs a module beautifully, gives you great roleplay moments, and then gives you like a questionnaire at the end asking what he can improve for the next session. Those people don't get RPG horror stories. They ultimately end up getting 5 stars on stuff like startplaying.com. Not sponsored by them, by the way. I know other creators that promote them, and it seems like as a service, a lot of people like it, but this Westmarch server is nothing like that website. I'm just trying to give an example of what would be a good paid DM service in theory. To the author here, I really hope you get a good experience with D&D in the future. Maybe you can find friends on Discord that have been interested for a while but haven't joined a group and take up the mantle as a dungeon master yourself, or just keep looking online and eventually you'll find a group that's good. Just be sure to quit a lot sooner if you feel like you're seeing a lot of the same red flags. I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. I picked the first one to showcase an example of someone who was a delusional main character, and in the second one I showed someone who was really reasonable and got rolled over by a pay-to-win main character, which I really didn't know that existed. So that's really crazy to see. Knowing money is the reason that the DM is treating them so much better is almost more annoying than like if it was someone they had a crush on. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Make sure to like and hype the video if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel as it really helps us grow. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.